Aloha and welcome to A Word with Ward. I'm Representative Gene Ward and we're broadcasting from the state capitol. And today we're going to go swimming. Where is the best place in East Honolulu to go swimming? Hanauma Bay. We're not going to actually go swimming. We're going to go through how we know about the Friends of Hanauma Bay, what they do, who they are, and where they're taking the bay. We are honored to have the president of Hanauma Bay, the new president, yes. Lisa Bishop. Brand new. How long, Lisa, have you been? February. This you're on your honeymoon.
That's right.
And the former president, they have a president emeritus, I understand?
Yes.
Mr. Richard Baker. Welcome, Dick.
I'm an emeritus. It makes me feel old.
Well, you know, I'm minority leader emeritus. It's only what you think of it when you hear the word, but most people don't even know what it means anyways. It just means maybe has been there or so.
That's a good
But to begin with, let's go to personal background. So the people who are watching will know, who are we talking about? Okay, Friends of Hanauma Bay, that sounds like an NGO and an organization. But who is Lisa Bishop? Lisa, what should people know about you?
Well, thank you, Gene, and thanks for inviting us here today. I'm a retired naval officer, and my husband and I had been stationed here in Hawaii many years ago. Mm-hmm. And when we decided to actually retire from active duty and from working, we decided to come back to Hawaii. And so my husband and I have been here for 8 years now, mm-hmm. and I was privileged enough to get involved with the Hanauma Bay Education Program and the Friends of Hanauma Bay almost 3 years ago. So I'm very fortunate.
So naval officer, ocean water, right. Hanauma Bay fits perfect.
Fits perfectly.
Were you in a submarine or
no,
naval officer?
No, actually I worked ashore most of the time. I was in communications.
Communications. Was
right.
that cybersecurity, I read?
Yes.
Which nowadays is very key. To me, the future war is not going to be shooting and banging and bombing. It's going to be hacking the lights out, hacking your bank accounts, That's and right. we got all the money and we got all the electricity. We don't need to have.
That's exactly right.
I know the show is not about that, but it really brings a very immediate, contemporary thing to mind. Mr. Baker.
Well, thanks, Gene, and thanks for having us. I agree with Lisa, absolutely. I am a retired Foreign Service officer. I served for the State Department for, just over 20 years. And I have spent the last just about 30 years here in Honolulu. First, I worked for the East-West Center. And now I am truly retired. I'm not sure what that means always. Doing whatever calls.
Mm-hmm. And Hanauma Bay was a calling that you had.
Hanauma Bay was a calling, and I very early got involved with Hanauma Bay, and was made the president of the Friends in the mid-90s, just before Mayor Jeremy Harris came up with the flashingly brilliant idea of building a visitor center.
When did the Friends of Hanauma Bay begin, and why? Because we know that they've been active for a while. We don't know how long it's been. Are you the historian also, Dick? Or
no, but the date 1990 fits in my mind. And 1991, we were granted status as the sort of official non-governmental partner for Hanauma Bay. So we've been doing that for 30 plus years.
And your role was as designated as the official partner of Hanauma Bay?
Well, there's a distinction between requirements and what's permissible. Requirements are relatively few, actually. We are required to help with cleaning up the bay, which we do 4 times a year.
You mean physically volunteers?
Yeah.
No, we have cleanups of Hanauma Bay, so onshore. And so we have a requirement to do that 4 times a year as part of the Adopt a Park program. So we're the official adopting.
So you pay for that, or you just bring in people for volunteers?
Volunteers come in to do that, and we have a huge number of volunteers that come out every quarter, not only individual citizens or families, but also members of the organization. Our last cleanup in May, we had 65 members of the Air Force's Leadership Academy came out to join us at our cleanup.
So people watching could actually say, hey, I'd love to go to Hanauma Bay and join the cleanup, because it's sometimes so difficult to get in when it's there.
Right.
And when the cleanup comes, they can certainly get in. How would they do that, actually?
Well, we advertise on our website and also to our members, and we put up posters and flyers throughout the Hawaii Kai community. We also have the help from the Hanauma Bay Education Program that sends out notices of our cleanups to the volunteers and their families. So our next one will be in August, and then in November. So we have 4 times a year.
So people can step forward and do as much and as often. You said it's once a month. They can,
4 times a year, once a quarter.
4 times a year. Now, when you did form Hanauma Bay and the Friends, there was a bit of a problem going on, and I always cite the mayor of Hanauma Bay, Alan Hong. He said there were 3 million visitors, and the bay was, quote, dying. Did you guys kick in at that exact intersection of
that
when?
was basically when we got involved. The phrase that I always use is that the bay was being loved to death.
With their feet on
And
the
it
coral
really
reef.
was, yeah. The coral was being broken down, stomped on. We also at that time had fish feeding, and it brought in all kinds of fish that shouldn't properly be in the inner bay, and the fish were so delighted to have free food that they sort of went wild and started nipping at people's knees and such. So that was not a situation that the park management
days of
wanted.
bread and peas.
Bread
as I
and peas,
remember, yeah?
yes, bread and peas. And what else was happening at that time? We had problems with tour organizations.
The over-commercial.
Yeah, and there were
yeah.
so many buses coming in of basically containing tour groups doing their around the island thing, that added significantly to the numbers of people who were at the bay. So we basically put in a set of rules that said no tour groups can come in buses and unload. They can come and look for 15 minutes from the lookout, but that's all. And it said, let's see, we said that, fish feeding, that was dealt with separately and a bit later, but it was in the same vein. And Lisa, what did I forget?
I was going to ask Lisa to fast forward that thing about the transportation, because I don't know if that one actually went away. Is it? There's still kind of a...
No, it really hasn't gone away. Before the Hanauma Bay Management Plan was put into effect that limited the commercialization of Hanauma Bay, the large tour buses were dropping off people at 42 people every 57 seconds. And so there were
That's Alan Hong's statistic, right?
That's right.
Every 57 seconds there was 40...
A new bus, a new large bus.
That's why no wonder
off.
there's 3 million people now.
That's right, and there were about 3 million people coming a year to Hanauma Bay. And by instituting a ban of the large tour buses, we were able to reduce the number of visitors to Hanauma Bay to about 1.5 million, and now we're just under 1 million a year that come. And we have seen a great improvement in at least the number of people who are not walking on the reef anymore. That also is attributed to the orientation
They got to go
program.
through the 15-minute film? Was it 10 minutes, 12 minutes?
It's a 9-minute video.
9 minutes. Okay.
It's an orientation. Everybody who comes there gets to go through it. And it talks about reef etiquette and also the marine ecosystem that constitutes Hanauma Bay, as well as some of the safety features regarding snorkeling and swimming in the bay. And so that orientation video has done a great job in reducing the number of people who are actually walking on the reef, and we're hoping that they're taking those preservation protocols with them when they leave to their own home countries or home neighborhoods.
No big tour buses, but I understand you may have small ones coming in.
That's right. As usual, when there's a law or there's a rule, somebody is clever enough to find a loophole, and the tour companies are doing that right now.
What are they doing?
They are operating their tours under a taxi shield or a taxi license. And so Snorkel Tour Company number 1 is actually bringing in their customers to Hanauma Bay in the commercial section where the overlook of Hanauma Bay is, and they're dropping them off there. But they're coming in under a taxi license because it is
As a
legal.
van, or what's the
As a
size of the
van.
van? As a van.
I think
Okay.
the maximum size is supposed to be a 10-passenger van.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're operating a shuttle service, or they're calling themselves a shuttle service instead of a tour company. But you'll still see them advertised on the internet, and in their literature, they are in fact a tour company offering tours of Hanauma Bay. And one of the things that presents a difficulty with that is that many of them are offering in their tour package to hand out snorkel equipment to their customers. And the equipment is usually not the highest quality, number one. And number two, the guides or the taxi drivers, as it will, provide a short primer on how to snorkel and how to use the equipment. I've stood there and watched them do it a few minutes and say, that's how you do it. And then they send their customers down to Hanauma Bay. They go through the orientation video and then are able to go down to the beach. However, we don't know just how well prepared these taxi drivers or these tour guides are in actually giving the proper information on how to snorkel and how to use the equipment. They are not necessarily instructors. They're not necessarily certified snorkel instructors to show the people how to use the equipment. And we've also heard that many times the visitors are told that they don't need to know how to swim in order to snorkel in Hanauma Bay. So that kind of safety information is a great disservice to anybody coming to Hanauma Bay. You really should know how to swim if you're going to try to snorkel.
The data seems to reinforce that, in that even though it's one of the most beautiful places in the state of Hawaii, it's one of the most numerous places for drowning in the places of Hawaii. Number one place in Hawaii is beautiful Hanauma Bay. You'd never associated the two together. Plus, it's such a tranquil, beautiful bay to be snorkeling in. You think it wouldn't happen, but again, poor instruction, and those people pour in help thinking, hey, this is duck soup. You don't have to learn anything.
That's right.
And kaboom.
And most people drown in 3 feet of water. So it's not like they're way out at the mouth of the bay. They're very close to shore. And we have the best lifeguards in the world here. It's just that they have a huge job. They're watching maybe 3,000 people a day on the beach who are snorkeling, which means they're floating face down in the water. And they're not trying to move their bodies a lot because they're trying to watch
looking at the
marine.
fish.
And so it's very difficult for the lifeguards.
Hard to tell the difference.
So they have a big job, and they're very well trained, but things happen.
I should commend you two for being the friends of what is now the world's best beach. If you saw the rating
We did.
a few weeks ago.
We did.
Dr. Beach
Did you guys
thinks
pay
we're
anybody
cool.
for that or what?
No.
I mean, Dr. Beach says the best beach in the world is enough.
Well, that's unfortunate
Yes.
because
It's going to have more people.
I can tell you that the Monday after that article came out, which was Memorial Day, one of our long-term volunteers at Hanauma Bay in the Hanauma Bay Education Program, who usually opens the beach desk at 8 o'clock in the morning, she said that she's never seen so many people at Hanauma Bay on a Monday morning as she saw right after that article was published. And unfortunately, what that does is it brings in more people, and that is directly contravenes the basic tenet of preservation. You don't want more people. You want fewer, better educated people to come to places like Hanauma Bay, which is in fact a nature preserve. It's not a beach park.
That's the proper terminology. It's a
Absolutely.
Nature preserve.
Nature
Hanauma
preserve.
Bay Nature Preserve.
not oceanic or whatever, just
Not a beach
Hanauma
park.
Bay Nature
Right.
Preserve. What can the Friends do, if anything, about, as you see this now going back towards pushing maybe another 1,000,000 visitors, or is it where it's already tuned to where you can't have more than you've got right now?
It's pretty well calibrated now.
Yeah, the current arrangement is, we think, sustainable. There's a sort of a problem for the long term in that we were supposed to have a carrying capacity study going on at the Bay at the same time that the new rules were put in, et cetera, the new facilities were built. Unfortunately, the carrying capacity study was basically dropped. It ceased for reasons that are unknown to me after the first year.
Right, the first and only carrying capacity study was done in 2000, and I believe it went for 3 years. I think the
Was that a
contract
statutory or a resolution with the city council?
No, this was before. I don't know how that came about, but it was one of the conditions which the city used to request DLNR to issue a conservation district use permit in order to build the educational facilities. And so DLNR granted approval to do that in November of 2001, but they stipulated that you must continue this annual carrying capacity.
Annual carrying, and there's only been one in how many years?
There's only been the first and only one, the baseline one, which was contracted for in 2000. I believe the money funded 3 years of that, and it was supposed to be building on that baseline study to show the impact, if there is one, of having 1 million people coming and interacting with the marine ecosystem at the bay. And no further carrying capacities have been done to date.
I think that's alert for our councilmen and your legislators to remind people that that is a very important step to keeping the sustainability and measuring it, and not just sort of eyeballing something. And
DLNR has recently issued a letter to the City and County of Honolulu asking them to start doing these carrying capacity studies and abiding by the conservation district use permit that was issued to originally build the education complex. That letter went out about 3 weeks ago to the city, and we have not heard what the results of that are. The city has said that they've set aside money in FY 2015, in June of 2015, to reinitiate the carrying capacity study. But nothing. This is now June of 2016, and the study has not begun yet. Plus, the city said that, or the director of Parks and Recreation, Director Nakota, said that the city only intends to do one study. They do not intend to abide by the annual requirement that DLNR stipulated in the permit that they issued in 2001.
And that's final?
Well, the city can say no, but then DLNR can take steps to further request the city to abide by.
And this is actually fairly typical of an area where multiple departments have authority in different parts of the program, and they aren't required to get organized to do their thing, or to give way to other interested parties. That's a fundamental problem of governance. We aren't going to try to solve that, but it affects the Bay, because this is one of the areas where the lack of coordination within the civil administration creates difficulties for worthwhile objectives like preserving the ecosystem.
If you're going to be good stewards, you certainly need that measurable.
You do. You really do. And the city could
qualitative study. Yeah, to me it's a no-brainer. But here's another problem that I think is a no-brainer. I understand you have problem getting school kids to come to the Bay because you got to have a lieutenant governor permission slip or something?
No, we've been told either the Attorney General
or the Attorney General?
The governor himself or herself has to sign.
I can't believe that.
We couldn't
believe
either.
that.
Private schools can come because they are private. They're not part of the state Department of Education. And so they are able to bring their school children as many times. All it takes is coordination with the Hanauma Bay staff and the education program. But public schools have to originate the request almost a year in advance of when they want to come, because it has to go through not only their superintendent, but has to go through DOE, the head of DOE, and then from there usually the state attorney general and then the governor. It's an indemnification issue. The parks and Hanauma Bay are part of the city. They're not state. And so the public schools are a state organization. And so the state and the city are arguing about indemnification issues to allow public school kids to come and enjoy any park, any beach park and Hanauma Bay on Oahu. And that is another thing that the Friends of Hanauma Bay have started working to try to correct.
You know, I've been doing this show for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I've never done what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to call the soccer moms out to make sure you help Hanauma Bay get your kids out of school and into the Bay without all of this bureaucracy. Going through a year's time. If you're a teacher, you're going to give a year's time a lead, and you're going to get through the AG and the actual governor to go and see the beauty of Hanauma Bay, the world's best beach. That makes no sense whatsoever.
Correct.
So soccer moms, please, organize. Call my office. No, that's not acceptable.
No,
That's not the way governance should be. That's not the way government should be organized or structured. I don't care whose jurisdiction it is. There's a better way to do it. This is not rocket science. Kids should be able to come freely as they go to the zoo freely, as they come to the Capitol freely. We don't have indemnification if they fall down the steps here.
Correct.
We just know that this is for our kids and it's important.
As the private schools do,
As the private schools
they
do.
bring their groups, they have blanket insurance coverage for their activities. So that legal technicality doesn't apply to the private schools, but it does apply to the public schools because they need a broad grant of indemnity in order to bring outside people in groups into the preserve.
Let's examine if we can do some of that legislatively by having a broad
really
guideline.
appreciate that
There's
because
got to
it's
be a
common
better
sense.
way. I mean,
Yes,
to deny our
yes.
kids to go to Hanauma Bay because the lieutenant governor or the governor or the DOE, and that's sad. Another sad thing, and I know we're running quickly through this process, but I did have Sid and Bob here earlier, and they talked about, you know, Hanauma Bay needs some repairs, and there's a lot of money in it, but the money's not being released. Are you guys a cash cow that people are kind of milking? Or I know this is a little more controversial than the usual, but is there any progress on your...
Actually, there really is. There is some progress on that, and it's hopeful. And again, we attribute it to Director Nakota, who is Director of Parks and Recreation. She has been in her position for, I believe, about 3 years now, and she's really understands the problem. And the basic problem is that Hanauma Bay Nature Preserve is a one-off entity within Department of Parks and Recreation, in that they have their own money. They are their expenses for operations, maintenance, and repair are paid for out of the revenues that come in from admission tickets and from the concessions that are authorized at Hanauma Bay. So there is no reason to request additional revenues from tax dollars every year. It is self-sufficient. Unfortunately, over the years, there has been a pattern within the city of treating the nature preserve as just another park entity and starving it of the repairs and the maintenance that it has required, to the point that it has taken 8 years to repair a roof, 6 years to repair something else, and we still have a list of items that have been identified by the nature preserve managers that need to be done 6, 7, 8 years ago that are still on the list to be done. There is no reason for repairs and maintenance issues to take as long as that, because Hanauma Bay has its own money. So it has been a struggle, and I think the Friends of Hanauma Bay have been highly active and have been positive advocates to have some of that money released from the Hanauma Bay Fund to pay for maintenance and repairs. So there has been some progress, but some items are still 5, 6, and 8 years out.
It sounds like the University of Hawaii, where we got probably $1 billion of delayed repairs and maintenance.
Exactly.
Some of the same issues, Gene, some of the same issues.
But it's not a...
Because that brings up liability issues when it's
Yes, it
where
does.
things that are faulty and people fall or break or even die, and you have the deep pockets of the city. I mean, that's kind of short run, penny wise, pound foolish as it goes.
That's exactly right.
But
We have made some
legally
progress.
complicated.
Yes.
Legally complicated, which is what the two departments of the state government that are dealing with this problem are wrangling about now. What kind of legal interpretation do you have to agree on in order to make it possible to do something which is otherwise
Yeah, common sense,
self-explanatory?
commonsensical. Exactly.
And the new carrying capacity study is being held up, we were told by Director Nakota, because of the same city versus state indemnification issues. The original carrying capacity study that was contracted for in 2000 did not have an indemnification clause. It was not necessary at the time, but one apparently is necessary now. So the monies have been available.
Wow.
The University of Hawaii has been contracted to carrying on the carrying capacity study, and it has not begun in a year because of wrangling between the state and the city over indemnification issues. So,
And Gene, this is just a classic of an issue that of collaboration between government departments that somehow just doesn't get done. We all know that the government departments, every one of them, has a burden of responsibilities that, you know, as long as your arm. And none of them have enough resources to do everything that somehow they're expected to do. We hear that, we agree. But in this particular case, because Hanauma Bay has its own source of revenue, there should be no reason why we should be stuck in line after every other department's favorite project to get time to get contracted. Makes no sense, is the phrase you
And
use.
clearly, I hear even sometimes that you will be subsidizing other labor and materials to other areas. You know, believe it or not, we just started, but we're out of time. I want to thank you too for what you. I know they pay you a lot at Friends of Hanauma Bay.
Yeah,
that's right.
Like my interns, you get gratitude and pizza.
I traded it for this cup of water.
For a cup of Lelo water. But thank you for not only serving in the Foreign Service in the East-West Center, but for your naval service and now what that international perspective we can bring right down local to Hanauma Bay. So thank you guys for being with Word for Ward. This is Representative Gene Ward saying aloha and mahalo.